Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode. After the presentation, we will conduct a question-and-answer session. To ask a question at that time, please press star then 1 and record your name at the prompt. This conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the meeting over to Laura Jimenez. You may begin.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Jimenez. I'm the Commercial Officer in Monterrey, Mexico. I will be moderating today's session. We have 3 speakers lined up. Let me get started by introducing Ms. Karen Sens, our Minister Counsel for Commercial Affairs at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City, who will deliver the welcoming remarks. Karen, please.
Thank you, Laura, and thank everyone for joining us today. As Laura said, I'm at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico. I'm in charge of the U.S. Department of Commerce's commercial service operations here in Mexico. The commercial service is the part of the U.S. government dedicated to helping U.S. companies get started in exporting or open new markets for them. And we have a particular focus on small and medium-sized companies, although we are happy to help all U.S. companies sell their products and services in markets overseas. Mexico is one of the most important markets for U.S. exporters, and so we have a large operation in Mexico. We have 4 offices here in Mexico City at the Embassy, in Monterrey, the office which has organized this webinar today, as well as Guadalajara and Tijuana. We offer a variety of services to help U.S. companies, everything from identifying potential partners, doing background checks on those partners, organizing trade events, taking delegations to the United States, and providing market information and market research. And in fact, we can customize services to the needs of our American company clients. Today's webinar is an excellent example of one of our services, which is to bring very useful and practical information to help companies successfully export. This webinar today is really focusing on new exporters or new exporters to Mexico. So it is filled with very practical and basic information. Perhaps more experienced exporters already know this information, but it's very important for companies to help them successfully export. I'm particularly pleased that you're joining us today to talk about Mexico, because Mexico, unfortunately, has been in the news for all the wrong reasons lately, whether it's because of concerns about an upswing in violence along the border, because the Mexican government has been taking on the drug cartels, and as a result there have been additional increased violence, or because of the most recent problem, which is the flu epidemic, the H1N1 flu, influenza, which could have started anywhere in the world, but unfortunately for Mexico, started in Mexico. And the Mexican government has been taking very aggressive measures to prevent its spread. And we applaud those measures, and now with the recent decision yesterday by the World Health Organization, they are encouraging all countries to take appropriate measures to prevent its spread. Despite these not very positive newsworthy items, Mexico continues to be an outstanding market for U.S. companies. In fact, we exported $151 billion to Mexico last year. It's our second largest export market, second only to Canada. So once again, I'm very pleased that you've joined us today. I think this is going to be a very helpful and informational webinar. And with no further ado, I'm going to turn it back to Laura so we get to the real speakers. Thank you all.
Thank you, Karen. In today's program, I would like to introduce Manuel Velazquez, who is our trade specialist here in U.S. Commercial Service Monterrey, and also in charge of customs for Mexico. Also with us is Rafael Peña Palma, who is a Mexican custom broker and Director General of Grupo AE. With 30 offices in Mexico, Grupo AE is one of the best alternatives in foreign trade, custom clearance, and logistics. They offer management transportation, trading services, supply chain logistic analysis, HTS tariff clarification, and other services. Mr. Pineda has over 20 years of experience in customs and is frequently the speaker in the U.S. about Mexican customs. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the chat feature on this webinar, and we will also take questions for you at the end of the session with a Q&A, and the operator will open up the line. Rafael and Manuel, why don't you both start telling us what the 5 most common mistakes to avoid for new exporters are?
Okay. let's start. I think it's important to let you know that we have a lot of attendance now, and I think it could be nice. At the same time, it could be scary because, like Rafael said before, probably many people have some scare about the Mexican custom, and this could be a very good update or very good information that you know what is the basics of the customs in Mexico. And we're going to start with a little introduction. Rafael?
Thank you, Manuel. Well, thanks everybody, and thanks for the invitation. First of all, I want to tell you that this is a very operation side of looking at the importations into Mexico, which is something good because it's not boring. I'm not talking about articles or laws or anything. It's just what happens in a day-to-day operation in the border. And it starts also with saying that the reason why you see most of the warehouses in the American side is that in Mexico, the responsibility of the importations into our country is shared by the importer of record and we as the licensed custom brokers. It's different than in the United States because in the U.S., that's what I know from our colleagues that we work together, is that most of something, if something happens in customs, let's talk about not responsibility, if something happens, it's more common to have a license of the importer record canceled or suspended rather than the licensed broker itself. So we as custom brokers in Mexico, that's why you see a lot of verification, checking goods, checking documents, and that's also a bad thing by the other hand because it seems like we are so bureaucratic, but that's how the rules are in Mexico, and it's a reason why as well. Most of the contraband comes to Mexico and not go backwards. It's just our country the problem, so that's why it's like this. We started as the relationship. It's very important when a relationship starts between the U.S. seller to a Mexican buyer. Most of U.S. sellers, well, they are under understanding of selling a good. You're saying just put the place where I need to send my goods, and I'll send them over there, and that's about it. I don't intend to know more about my merchandise from them. And it goes along much, much more than that. And many times they don't know that the merchandise gets stopped in the border, the reasons why the merchandise gets stopped. So it starts from, that's why I always recommend that you at least know or have some information who you're selling to. If it's a company, if it's a person, if it exists, if it's just a commercial people, if it's a broker, if it's anybody, what kind of company does exist in the other side of the border? There's just a person that wants to introduce something into our country, because that is a lot of help also you can attend or give them before even sending the goods to the border. Okay. Okay? Mm-hmm. The most known information before shipping the material. Very, very important in that, and I'm going to put examples to my presentation. Does the importer have an importing permit, which we call it Padrón de Importadores? I don't know if that has a, remember that Spanish is my first language, so I don't know if it has a correct translation, but it's an importer permit. Mm-hmm. It's like
the national record that provides you the government, the Mexican government provides to the Mexican importer in order to import in Mexico.
Okay. Very simple question. It has a lot of help, does a lot of help to whoever is buying your merchandise. Why is this? We got a lot of calls, even when you're talking about air freight, for example, of a person that purchased a material from U.S., it arrives to the airport, he already paid for transportation, even international air freight transportation, and what happens when it gets to customs, happens that the importer record does not, the company or the person does not have an importer record mm-hmm. permit. Mm-hmm. So everything is just spent without a cost. You shouldn't even ask for the goods to get to our country. So that's the main thing, the most important question that I will always recommend of sellers to do from the United States. Mm-hmm. am I manufacturing the product or am I reselling it? Happens a lot as well that when we get goods into the airports or into the border, we get an NAFTA certificate, and when we go physically to check the goods, it says China, or it says some place of Europe or any country, and that's a big thing in Mexico. That's a big problem in Mexico. So it is very important to know that you should have your support in case you're not the manufacturer of showing what's the correct origin of your merchandise. If I am reselling the goods, do I really know the country of origin? That goes along with what I explained previously. Does my product qualify as NAFTA origin? That's a lot. It is not the same that the origin or the country where I'm selling the goods from. You need to know if really you can extend a NAFTA certificate, if it qualifies for NAFTA. That goes along to another, probably another seminar, completely webinar of NAFTA, but it goes along with the NAFTA treaty between our countries. You cannot just extend a NAFTA certificate and sign for it and get a responsibility if you're not sure that it qualifies as a NAFTA product.
I think it could be interesting. You could say one or two advantages of to be on a NAFTA product.
Okay. One of them is that you pay less duties per country, just as being NAFTA.
The importer.
The importer in Mexico, yes.
Okay.
In fact, for you, it's good to compete because if you're competing with other countries, getting your product into Mexico, or you have an advantage that typically you don't pay import duties. Well, as long as probably a month before that there's a big fight over there, but before that month of those 90 products that they change for paying duties into Mexico, but typically you don't pay import duties into Mexico.
Your client is going to be more happy because of that, no?
Of course, and that's why many times they ask for a NAFTA. You give it, and you shouldn't give the NAFTA. That's why it's very important to know if you qualify. And another one is that typically also the permits, they are a lot less, how can I say, mandatory for the NAFTA region, for the NAFTA product as well.
Okay.
And as a tip, obviously the shipping country is not always the country of origin. That's also very, very typical in our day-to-day operation. Thanks. Do I know how to fill up a NAFTA certificate? If you don't know how to fill it, it's better to ask and to fill it the correct way instead of don't do it correctly, and then in the future operation or when the goods are presented into the border, then you cannot apply for it. Then you ask for substituting that NAFTA. Then it's a back and forth sending off documents.
In this case, Rafael, who can help you to fill the NAFTA certificate?
Okay. Typically, even your commerce offices in your cities where you are, or even the custom broker can send you an example saying, fill it up like this, just put the description, the tax classification, the classification A, B, C, D, according to what the product is. And there's always, even in web pages, there's a lot of information that you can get.
Okay.
And if you still have questions, just probably you, Manuel, or myself, you can always, it's better to ask. I always say that. Does the material goods require a special importing permit? That's very important. If you're telling me you're sending a chemical, you will typically need a permit coming into Mexico. So it's very important to know in advance if your product will need a special import permit into our country. That can always be known in advance. Simple sending a picture, sending the NSDS, where I don't know exactly the words of when it's a chemical, it's an or safety data sheet. All those support help us to come to a third classification will help us to know if you need an import permit or not. I always, and I should say this since the beginning, but I always said that 90% of things to be done before getting a product into the country can be done in advance of the merchandise getting into the border. So all of these can be done in advance. Okay. I'm sorry that I didn't mention this. This is also a big thing. The insurance is so until which destination. And believe me, there's a limbo between crossing the border, between getting into a place in the border and then getting into a shipping transportation in Mexico. That crossing of the bridge, make sure that it's always covered by the insurance company. And if it's covered already in the insurance company, you need to declare it because it's part of the valuation of the goods. So it's also a very important thing. I always ask you to the importer, because your merchandise has an insurance. And they typically go back and forth with the supplier and the transportation company, so it's very important to know since they ship the goods. Does the material shipped correspond to what was bought? Many times as well, they ask you for several amounts of material, and you're going to send shortments or overages sometimes according to you sending samples. It's very important to know before it gets there.
Because this is one of the big problems that we have here in Mexico. No? The Mexican authorities, I don't know, they have like a special care about this kind of situation when you send more product than the invoice says, right?
Well, it's considered contraband.
Yes,
it's not considered a mistake.
This is very important to know.
So it's a big thing. In fact, I always say that if you're going to ship something, always a pre-alert saying you're missing extra amount of products from this kind of part number. Typically, the shipper will know before they send, or their department, but we never know until it gets to the border. So it's more like we're doing the examination work,
yes.
and most of the time can be known in advance. When we talk about statistics, before entering the mistake number one, from the goods that arrive to the border, from 100% of the goods that arrive to the border, because I'm a very good sample of what I receive from many types of importers into Mexico, 30% of the goods arrive without a certificate of origin when they can apply for it. Why is this so important? This is important because with me needing the product in a very hurry matter, I need to apply the NAFTA certificate to get that advantage as an importer of record in Mexico. If I don't have the NAFTA certificate, then I will import it and pay duties for it.
This I think is important because there are many companies that the product doesn't apply as a NAFTA. The only difference between a NAFTA product and a non-NAFTA product is they're going to pay the duties, right?
Yes. Besides that, there's merchandise that you can always tell that it says made in USA, that it's American, but you still don't have a NAFTA certificate.
Okay.
They need to cross the merchandise, they need to clear customs. It's for them, sometimes they have a plan that it's being stopped because it's missing a part, so they import it. They still have 1 year to go and claim those duties.
This is a good point.
For the future. But what happens is that typically that year goes on, and they never claim those duties.
Okay.
So it is 30% of the merchandise that should apply for NAFTA, they don't arrive with certificates for them.
Okay.
25% of them are typically new part numbers that we need to classify. And when I talk about classifying, it is physically going, opening the product, look at the product, ask for pictures, ask for information of what function, that is, what is made of, what material is made of. So it's a lot of information that we need to know with a new part number. Again, coming back, if I'm a seller, I'm sending my goods into one buyer in Mexico, and I typically send them these part numbers, and I'm sending a new part number, I can know it from my system. If I send a clear alert saying, I'm sending this part number, or this part number substitutes this other one, so it's typically just 100% new, I'm sending you the information in advance to know what it is, what material it's constituted of, what is it for. I can go ahead and classify it before it gets to my dock in the border.
Okay.
So that's a lot of information that can be advanced. That's a very high statistic. 80% come with unusable commercial invoices. So we need to go and process those invoices and make descriptions of what it comes in the invoice. Why is this? Because when I have a part number that is in the invoice that does not have a description in English or Spanish, could be in French as well, but English or Spanish, I don't know what the merchandise is. Even I need to protest. Physically protest means I need to type in the back of the invoice what I'm talking about, what the goods are. Because in case of an inspection, they need to know what they're checking. So it's just like also the rules you have in your country that has to have the description, and you have to put in the merchandise physically what the country of origin is, mostly about the same. Just we ask always to try to put them as clear as we can.
There's a fine if you don't provide a clear invoice, or why so it's too high the percentage of to see this unusual commercial invoice. Why?
It's just because the systems of the sellers are very square, very strict, that you cannot type in information. So they go like that. The merchandise is being sent like that. But in the border, most of the time, even the sellers don't know what kind of work needs to be done to those invoices.
They need to be in communication with the people from the export side.
Yeah. So as I say, if that information can be done in advance, it will always prevent of investing time on fixing the invoice. Okay. Packaging, it's a big thing always. 40% of the goods that we receive in our warehouses, they come with packaging that is damaged, that it's sometimes broken, that we need to repack. So it's also a big problem in the border. All of these take time, so we're trying to avoid time to get things crossed as fast as we can.
Okay. Well, this was the introduction. Now we're going to start with the mistake number 1. That is misclassification. I think this is one of the key factors of to have a successful and happy export experience in Mexico.
Okay. I put an example here of some harmonized tariff schedule or the tariff code that sometimes even with a NAFTA certificate, they send a tariff classification, and when it gets to the border, we go and find out that it's another classification.
I think it's interesting because I think we have many people who are new to export. Just explain a little bit what is an HS code, a popular HS code.
Okay. The third classification is the number named now by the World Economic Customs
Organization
Committee or organization, that all the goods should be classified in that harmonized tariff code. It's just a worldwide code. Some of them vary by the end of the 2 or 4 numbers. And
Mexico is I think the international, there are the 6 first number, and then we have the other 2 for Mexico, and there are other 2 that are 10. But right now we are working with the 8.
Yes. So whenever there's a difference, there's 2 things that happen. I cannot apply the NAFTA if there's a difference. Even I ask for a new NAFTA, or I just import it with the correct classification I am putting to it. The broker is the one legal liable for the tariff classification in Mexico. Even they change the NAFTA certificate, or they put me, or they send me the backup information saying, no. When you talk about this is not a plastic part, this is a valve because of this, and that.
The characteristics.
Then the characteristic, the information, a brochure. I recommend always to have websites. I remember, and I give this example as well, I remember importing for a customer that they used to have a website when you can always go and key in your part number and look at the product with all the information there. So you can always get the tariff classification correct.
Yes, because this I think this is other important and strategic factor here that it depends your industry. I understand. It's not the same if you are sending a screw or I don't know, or it depends for which industry is the classification. I understand that.
Not just the classification, no. One tariff classification could have a permit,
okay,
and the other one will not have a permit.
Yes.
So even if you think that it's one tariff classification, you send your goods, you get stopped on the border, then there's another criteria of tariff classification. And in that case, that merchandise can get stopped until you get the permit. So you're talking about time, about sending information back and forth. Again, you can always have this information in advance.
Okay.
A simple catalog, description, function of the goods, what it's made of, can give us a very, very exact target classification of what we are planning to export to Mexico.
And with this, because we noticed that there's some certificates, like this free certificate of sales, the certificate of free sales, and you will notice because the HS code, no?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Number two.
Valuation.
Valuation. Mexico, sometimes it's complicated on determining the valuation of the goods. Most of the goods have a market value. So that market value should be the one playing on the imports into Mexico. Obviously, the country of origin influences on the duty because it impacts the value of Mexican customs. But what I recommend is that when you're going to send something with a discount, or you're going to send something for free because there's going to be a sample or something, try to communicate that to your importer or to the broker so they will always know why is that difference. I'm going to give you an example. I remember importing some scooters into Mexico. So when we got to customs, even though it was a green light, they say they had a suspicious undervaluation of the goods. So they stopped the merchandise. It was 7 o'clock in the afternoon. They say, by law, I could let you go, but if it's okay with you, I need to verify this valuation with the supplier. I could be strict on myself and say, well, you need to let me go, but you always work with those guys every day. So I say, okay, I have nothing to hide. Go ahead and check the valuation. What they did next day is they went on the web and look at the values of the goods, and then they say, well, these are 30% under the price of a typical market value. They call the supplier from Mexican Customs, and they say, we have an importation here for this importer of record. Can you verify that these goods cost this amount or this much? They say, yes, there was a special offer that we did this month, and you're exactly right. That invoice that you're looking at is a correct valuation. Okay, thank you, and then they let me go. So valuation is also a big thing in Mexico that you will always need to check. And by the other hand, sometimes it's not on the hands of the seller. Sometimes the importer record can go and put some liquid paper to the invoice, put it under value, import it, and pay less duties for it. That's a very common thing, I'm sorry to say this, with people that they don't have a good accounting information in the company. And why do I say this? Because importing something that you pay $100 for it, and you're importing it on $80 for it, is not even deductible for the Mexican company. So they don't have something to prove that what they pay for is what they import for. So it's a very, very thing that even as sellers, they can always recommend the importers in Mexico to don't do that, because that's a problem. It can be a problem, and by the seller don't know, and then in 1 or 2 weeks they're being asked by customs, is this correct? In fact, the other example that you can put over there, Manuel, the next slide, is exactly this. This was a copy that we get from an audit. A company was audited from the Mexican customs because of value.
The Mexican Custom Agency has some kind of power to go with the American suppliers?
That's a very good question, Manuel. There's been now 8 to 10 years that Mexican customs and American customs share information.
Okay.
And this is part of the NAFTA treaty, but they do share information as much as that Mexico has 5 or 6 offices in the U.S. sharing information and backwards, in and out. Why is this? Because there were a lot of inbounds that they didn't cross into Mexico, that they stayed in your country, and by the other hand, there were a lot of merchandise that we were told that it was certain kind of goods that they came from Asia, and there were another kind of goods that they were contraband. So they found out that this will be very helpful for both countries. They share a lot of information. So in these cases, Manuel, when customs, and this was a steel company, steel has a lot of problems. I don't know if there are still companies connected, but when you talk about their production molino, how do you say molino in English?
Mill?
Yes. On their production mill, they say, well, this mill is in the United States, and typically it was on Ukraine or Russia or somewhere else. And then it's very difficult for Mexican customs to know just by seeing the goods
if the origin is from there.
Yes, because it doesn't say made in this particular part. So what they do, that they go ahead and tell American customs, we're going to audit this supplier in the U.S., and they go by this outsourced company, and they go and they audit the supplier in the U.S. And believe me, they are always working together. So you will receive a visit, even from Mexican companies, with an American authority with him, visiting that supplier.
This is interesting to say that the Mexican government, in this case the Mexican Customs Bureau, has resources to go there. No, this is in order to many companies who start to export into Mexico know that.
Not just that, Manuel. Mexican customs, even what you hear about them, they change a lot. What the problem that you hear, or companies calling you that they have their merchandise stopped in the border, just think about this. Just 10% of the goods are being revised. From those 10%, you get hundreds of calls every month. So imagine the other 90 that it's crossing the bridge. Simple. It's crossing the bridge. So that's why they share a lot of information. So while they don't check the goods in that particular moment or in the future, that those kind of audits can happen pretty easy.
Oh, okay.
You were talking about, when we talk about systems, customs has grown a lot of systems, so they know what you imported, at what price, what description, what specification, how much you pay for duties. If you imported a temporary importation to manufacture in Mexico, if that material went out, if it didn't went out. So you have all that information in the system that will go along and be shared with the American customs, and then they go together and go and visit a supplier. And I've been participating backwards also. I remember American customs coming and visiting one of my customers in Mexico because they had some questions physically coming. I'm not talking about a document. They have their permit and all the legality support. The customer called me, said, can you support me with this? I was visiting the company with American customs, visiting the supplier as well. Can you show me your manufacture process, where your raw materials come from, documents or where you purchase your raw materials, if they qualify for NAFTA? So there's a lot of information with this kind of audits that is being shared. So you can get along with your bad importation once or twice, but sooner or later, if you're an important supplier or you're an importer in Mexico, they will catch you, believe me.
Nice. Okay. We move to the next one. And we are in the NAFTA certificate of origin.
Well, yes, I mentioned this, Manuel, because it's an important, very, very important factor, as you mentioned before, of paying or not paying duties. So when you send a NAFTA certificate, make sure that it's filled up correctly with complete export information, sometimes the producer, the lack of detailed description of the goods as well, address, zip code, company name, tax ID, signature is very important. A very important thing, Manuel, is that a NAFTA certificate for the importer record in Mexico, he needs to have it in his file in original.
This is important.
So that's very, even sellers can tell you how many times are they being asked for a NAFTA certificate in origin.
The Mexican importer.
The Mexican importer.
This is
so it's a. If I'm going to purchase a company in the U.S. and in exactly the same characteristics of company, I get an advance of a company sending me without asking for them a monthly or a yearly NAFTA certificate in original for my importations. I really appreciate that, because the import-export clerk or manager is very busy with many things, that when he finds out, he cannot apply NAFTA for many things that already happened, that already been imported, and a year passed, and then I cannot apply for it.
I think this is very important to let know to all kind of companies, in particular the new ones to the market, the new ones for export, that this is a process and a document that they could help to Mexican importers to have everything in file and in place, and they could help them, no? In a very easy way, just sending this information.
Yes. It does make a difference. It does make a difference.
This is important to know. Next. Documentation, the mistake number 4, I think this is a key one.
Yes, very important. Unreadable commercial invoices. Sometimes we receive invoices with handwriting on it. Descriptions only by part number. You can never tell what's the description of the goods. We mention it. Documents arrive after the material arrives at the border. I always ask, why do we receive most of the invoices in the border with the goods, even after the goods arrive? I will say, well, if I'm coming from Chicago to Laredo, I'm driving at least 3 days, 4 days according to the transportation company. Why can I don't get the documents in advance? And I'm still asking for the same questions the 15 or 20 years after that I started as a broker. And I don't know if it's that they send it to the importer record, or the importer doesn't send them to us. I don't know if it's just a common thing of doing it and saying, well, I will put an envelope and ship it with the merchandise, but that in the past when you didn't have internet and attachments, well, I understand it's just another expense. But now that you can advance that information easy, why?
But who wants to require this document? The Mexican importer or is the U.S. exporter who is going to send in advance to the custom broker?
What I recommend that even they are dealing with an importer record in Mexico, if they can advance the documents to the custom broker that is going to work with the merchandise in the border, it's a lot of help and makes a lot of difference as well. So those are the things that help us speed up an importation. Because then, or put a copy paste on an email for the import record as well as the custom broker.
Okay.
Because we can receive the documents in advance.
Nice. So, next one. Here is an
That's an example. Probably, I don't know if it's very clear, but believe me, if you could see that invoice physically, it will be as clear as you can see it on the screen. It's very difficult to know what is the merchandise over there.
Lack of description, like we say here. Next. Again, just to be clear about this mistake that is documentation.
Readable, clear content, descriptions, unit price, part number, unit of measurements, quantity. In the packing list as well, readable, description, part number, quantity, weight, unit of measurement. All these descriptions, all this information is very helpful for us.
Could be in Spanish or in English, or,
yes.
or
in English is fine, Manuel, as long as we have it.
Okay.
If you can add over there a pre-alert that you can put here when it's short or over, shortages or overages, it will be very helpful as well, that we can go and find out where's the shortage instead of counting and making sure that the merchant that is in the invoice is the one that is coming physically.
Okay.
That we can match. That's a great word.
We are in the mistake number 5, and I think this is one of with the custom broker. It's very important to know that you're going to work with a well-established custom broker. Here, what do you have?
Okay. Manuel, it's been publicated and there's been a lot of advertisements that when you ship merchandise out of the United States with a certain amount over $1,000, I think, or about $2,000, you are forced, it's mandatory that you do a shipper's export declaration. This is mandatory. It's not something that you want to or not want. Even, I can tell you something, many times, shipper's export declarations are being done right now without people knowing that it's being done. Mm-hmm. So every time a seller sends merchandise to Mexico, this document is being filed through your customs system. It's like a validation process, and then it can cross the bridge. So now I can tell you that it's certain kind of export entry, certain kind. It's not as how can I say that, as formal, but it's also a document that needs to be filed before your goods crossing from U.S. to Mexico. And this is American authorities, and we as forwarders need to go and attend an exam and pass and get an authorization to be able to do a cheaper export declaration. Okay. In fact, there's fines and many things for avoiding doing a correct cheaper export declaration.
What about the people who send their products through the, I don't know, courier services, DHL, the FedEx, or?
If the goods are over this amount of dollars, many of the times the same couriers are doing it for them.
Okay.
But it's under their name. Their name is being registered, who's being the exporter, and who's the one selling from the U.S.
Okay, this is good.
Many times we have, because not knowing these requirements, we have negligence of the exporter regarding signature of a POA. A POA is a power of attorney that we need. We need this power of attorney to file those goods. It's like the people authorizing me to do shipper's export declaration under their name. Delays clearing of the shipment in the border without a power of attorney, I will never do an exportation. The merchant will never get out of my warehouse in the border.
I think a good thing here, or a special thing to say, is that you could have, the American export could have several power of attorney, right?
Yes. Manuel, if you work with several brokers or several forwarders, yes, you can always. I don't think there's a restriction on that.
Okay. This is good.
Okay. Well, and it's part of an implementation process. When we go and implement an importer in Mexico, we contact the sellers in the U.S., send them an email presenting ourselves, and tell them, you need to sign me this power of attorney, you need to do this, we're going to be doing exportations under their name, and 50 or 60% of the time we have problems to get this POA signed because they don't know that this is a restriction. They think it's about us, and honestly it's not about us, it's just missing information that people have.
Okay, well, like you noticed, we're going to talk about 5 mistakes, but when we start to talking about this, we find other, like as a plus, we're going to give you as a bonus a mistake number 6, because we find out that it's very important to let you know about this one.
Before that, man, I just want to mention that what it says that it's an obligation to report all the material that will be exported to our country.
Yes, it is. This is important to say.
The next one is an example of power of attorney that is being filled by the sellers, by the people that is attending this webinar. They are the ones responsible for filling this kind of power of attorney. And the next one is the shipper export declaration that we file with American system, with American customs as well.
They receive this document from the custom broker, or
we do it as a forwarder, as a forwarding agency in the U.S. Manuel, that we are for receiving goods.
Okay.
We can find it. Not just it can be done by an American broker. It can be done by a forwarder, and even I think it can be done by a transportation company.
Okay.
But you need your authorization to be able to file shipper's export declaration.
Oh. And this is the mistake number 6.
There was a big, issue about packaging recently, about famous pallets.
Yes.
And we'll talk about it later, but it's important to know that in the border we get material without labeling, many times without a part number, without description. So when you go and do a verification of saying this is the invoice, and you go ahead and look at the part, you can never tell which part is what, and how can you do a verification of the good. So I always recommend, if you can label it, many times when it's barcoded, you can always go and scan it, and that's a lot of help that we can put into our systems as well. And label the shipment as suggestions with the total quantities, also per carton. Sometimes it just comes a box, and then inside the box it's a little box, and inside that little box it's more little boxes there. So all the information that can be labeled outside on the site can be yes. Merchandise should be packed and marked by part numbers, and also a good quality of package is also. Remember that when you talk about an importation into Mexico, you're talking about many people that interfere in this. You're talking about you as sellers, a transportation company that if it's LTL or less than a truckload, it goes to several distribution centers. So it's a transportation company, it's a warehouse in the border, then it's a trucking company in Mexico, and then a final thing. So you're talking about 5 or 6 times that merchandise is being handled. If it's inspected in customs, then you're adding another player over there. So a good packing is very important as well.
Okay.
I just put an example there of discrepancies. Sometimes what says outside the packing, outside the box, is not what it says inside. So it's big thing again, unpack it, put on our carton, put on our label, and doing that also always in the order will be cost and will be time.
And obviously, I think the Mexican customs officers start to, pointing out in this kind of shipment, because if you are having these discrepancies or mistakes, they want to point out the shipment, no?
Yes, they will. That always happens. They start with the importer. They say, well, this importer of record always has this not liable information, and so the first thing they do is they start inspecting you more merchandise. So instead of the 10, you get to 15, 20, and it goes over. Or in the future, they can start again interchanging information and saying, can you go and check this particular supplier, because it's a common mistake that this happens. What I was talking about, the wood pallets should be fumigated before shipping out the material, and this is the 3 countries right now. It should be stamped with the official seal, and all the pallets should be fumigated in order to clear. It's a norm that it's not. It's just also an NAFTA. I don't know if it's a worldwide, but it's a standard that needs to be accomplished. It's also timing and investing in money. I have always an inventory of pallets in my warehouse because this always happens. So between the shipment of 20 pallets, out of those 20 pallets, 10 will be missing this.
But who needs to inform to the exporter that they require this kind of pallet?
Manuel, if they're sending into Mexico, they need it. Okay, so they need these particular stamped, fumigated pallets.
It's a must.
It's a must. Plastic does not have these requirements. Plastic pallet, is important to know, does not have these kind of requirements. Even though it's a lot more expensive, but you're right, they don't have these requirements. It's just for the las plagas, the wood for the disease.
Okay.
That's why it's, even though it's not for carton, it's just for wood.
In this case, is there the more popular? The wood is the more popular pallet to introduce.
95% of the goods are being imported in wood. Unfortunately, because of the trees.
Yeah. Okay, we have here one of the the summary of all these mistakes and suggestions. You notice, the custom broker has a special part to work with you. If you don't have a well-known and trustful custom broker, you're going to have a lot of problems. And this is why we suggest you that you need to work with a very well-known custom broker that knows the Mexican side and the U.S. side. No?
Yes, most of the mistakes, as I say, can be avoided. And if you really trust that the guy that receives the merchandise in the border, it's a professional company, it's a professional people that work over there, that they help you, they really help you. You can always get good advice every time you ship your goods. And even we get audited by some of our customers in our warehouses, and we always learn from them. They teach us many things, and they always learn from us. And saying, if you go and do this, you can spend less time in the border for crossing your goods. So the must-dos that I put here, well, I recommend that you know your Mexican client, not just sell them and that's it. Ask your custom broker for the tariff specification. Very important. As I mentioned, you can always have a tariff specification before getting to the border. For various classifications, send pictures, web links, catalogs, many information that can be done in advance. Establish with your clients the terms of responsibility, who pays the freight, until where, conditions, Incoterms that probably part of many mistakes. Those FOBs, Incoterms applied in the border, at least incoming in trucks, shouldn't be applied. And at least 70% of the invoices come with FOB. They just apply for ocean. So those kind of mistakes.
And you know, here I think it's important to know that related with the Incoterms, the terms of the responsibility, here is part of the door-to-door activity, you know, from the U.S. company and the Mexican. Because if the Mexican say, you know, I want that you provide me, you know, send me the shipment to my door. Mm-hmm. I think they could do working with a custom broker who has that experience to, you know, to.
Yes. If it makes a difference, Manuel, and you need to send your goods placed in a particular company in Mexico, probably it's just a physical person or it's just a person, a small company, there's always a legal way of doing it correctly, because there needs to be an importer record, Manuel, mm-hmm. and then that importer record needs to supply that company. So everything has to be documented correctly, and it has to be in an accounting terms very well filed, you know, for getting the goods. Send an after certificate will always help you sell your merchandise in Mexico if you qualify for NAFTA, obviously. Ship material with a copy of documents required, invoice and packing list, but remember to send it in advance. It's more thankful if you send it in advance. Send documents to custom broker before the material arrives at the border. Again, our attorney, NAFTA, believe me, many times we receive the goods over there. We didn't even know who was the supplier, and we need to start from zero when we receive a good from them. Get a power of attorney, get an after certificate, get an invoice. So if I am an importer record in Mexico, and I'm already buying from a company in the U.S., that company in the U.S. has the proper documents, he could be advancing those documents to that particular forwarder in the border, and believe me that he'll be surprised saying, well, I really thank this seller because he's advancing me a lot of information mm-hmm. that will help me before the goods arrive to the border. Label each package with the correct part number, we mentioned it, and the wood panels should be fumigated as well. And believe me, if these most do things are being done by you, I guarantee you that in an 80 or 90% can be speed up very much regarding the importations in Mexico.
It's important to know that every product has their own magic. No, I think you need to have to know that for it's different import textiles, to import steel, to import food, and I think this is why it's important that you know that there's some kind of flexibility here.
You're right, Manuel. Regarding each sector, even chemicals have their own life, I can tell you. Metals, produce, even raw materials itself, temporary importations in Mexico to manufacture. So all these kinds of importations can be worked as long as we have the support, even with the importer or the seller. And many times, if the seller already made a commitment to send a company, that happens a lot as well, Manuel, that a seller made a commitment on sending a merchandise to Mexico City, to Guadalajara, to Monterrey. So the buyer is waiting for his goods in Mexico. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So he's taking into account that he will do everything for him. So that's why these most goods should be negotiated, even negotiated, or being deal with the importer mm-hmm. since you start making the sale in Mexico.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Rafael. I think it's time for the questions now. If you have any question,
Operator, please open the lines for Q&A.
Thank you. If you would like to ask a question from the phone line, please press star then 1 and record your name at the prompt. Please unmute your line when you record your name. To withdraw the question, press star 2. Once again, for questions from phone line, it's star 1.
And we already have a few questions, but I'll go ahead and ask our speaker. And somebody wants to know what do you mean by unusable commercial invoice? Please give more detailed information of what is unusable.
Okay. When you send an invoice with, can we go to slide number 11? When we send an invoice that is not clear on what it comes in the shipment, that one, yes, thank you, Manuel. This is not usable for me for being imported. So what we do physically is that we go on the back of the invoice and we type the description, the value, because this is an official document, right? Manuel, it will be a document that can be revised or checked in an inspection in customs. Okay. In fact, you leave a complete file in customs for the future, well, revisions or whatever. So what we meant by this is that when you do a correct description of part number, goods, unit price in the invoice, these invoices are the ones used for the importation. We don't need to retype it or to put, in fact, it's just like a process of the invoice. When you type in and you need to sign a responsible saying, I am protesting this invoice because it wasn't clear and sign for it. So in case there's a problem in customs, you are responsible for protesting that invoice. Okay. So that's unusual means that, well, this information and on is probably mostly about the same. So that's why we really appreciate when we have a complete information in the invoice. Okay.
Do we have any questions, operator?
Yes, thank you. Our first question from the phones is from Jeanette.
Okay.
Yes, I actually have 2 questions. I'm unclear as to who does the power of attorney. Is it the seller? Is it the broker? Is it the forwarding company? Who actually does the power of attorney?
Okay. For shipper export declaration, sending your goods into Mexico, for the U.S. purpose, for U.S. Customs, the seller does the power of attorney. And I'm talking about for shipper export. For importing goods in Mexico, there's a power of attorney as well that we need to get from the importer in Mexico. So one is done by the seller to be the exportation from your country to Mexico, and the other one is being done by the importer. I didn't mention this in the presentation because that's something that we get. It's an authorization to do importations under the name of the importer record in Mexico. So if your question was for the shipper export declaration in U.S., is you as the seller.
So, and is there a online document that you can download so that for the power of attorney?
Well, in the presentation there's a sample.
So you can make one off of that sample?
Yes. They're going to have this presentation.
Yes, you will be the presentation.
You will be receiving this presentation, Jeanette.
Okay.
And in fact, if you need to email me so I can send you a format as well, no problem at all.
Okay, and then my other question is, how do you find a good company, whether it's the custom brokers or the forwarder? Because I had one experience where I've only shipped into Mexico once, and I had the forwarding company online with my sales representative from Mexico and the LTL carrier, and not once did the forwarding company tell me that he could also do the brokerage end of it. So when my Mexican sales rep found a broker. They were in 2 different warehouses. And I had all the documents sent to everybody prior to, and when it got down to the forwarding agent, then the broker said, well, why is it there? Why didn't it come here? And it fell apart when it hit the border.
In our case, we have a contact list with several custom brokers that we could share with you. Obviously, we met before with this company. They are very reliable, but you need to check we have there's a website that you could see the record of this company and how they are, doing the business here in Mexico. I don't know what you could comment about that, Rafael.
Well, Manuel, to be honest, depends on who's paying for the services. If the importer of record in Mexico is the one responsible for getting his goods into Mexico, he'll be the one telling you, send it to this particular broker. If your responsibility is to leave, to put your merchandise into Mexico in the door of the buyer,
on the LTL carrier.
well, you need to find it's many companies, international companies, or somebody that could do that importation to Mexico. Now, if your commitment is getting your goods into Mexico, remember, this does not work like in the U.S. that you can have a bond as an American company and import it into Mexico. This is a very different scenario. In Mexico, you need to be a legal established company with your importer record filed and authorized by the Mexican government. So you need to find the correct way of getting that particular, how do you say, commercial
trading company
to import it and then getting it into your customer.
So if I emailed you, you could send me the website with the list of companies?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Operator, any other questions?
Yes, your next question comes from Alpha Robinson.
I just had one question on the packing list where you listed that you need to put the weight. Is it the net and gross weight, or do you just need the gross weight?
Well, it's appreciable. We really appreciate that you put both, but gross weight is fine. And I tell you this because even in Mexican customs as well in American customs, they have the big weight stations there that when they have a question saying, well, I don't trust that this particular merchandise that pays duties upon the weight that's more typical, it weighs the amount that they're telling me. So gross weight is enough, but we really appreciate if you can put both.
Oh, in the U.S., you have to put the net and the gross on the packing list when you're importing, because customs also looks at the weight of the unit to also verify, the product. Because if you're bringing in nails, a nail should only weigh like 1/10 of a pound, and they compare that to the shipment. So that's why I asked: is it net and gross?
Okay, if the product pays duties upon weight, you need to put both. You're right. But if you're talking about a machine that it pays for its own particular HTS or harmonized car classification, and the weight is not so important, we can put a gross weight with no problem.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Operator, other question?
Yes, your next question comes from Eliza Herrera.
I'm sorry, that was a power of attorney, and I got the answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we have a question from Alberto Diaz.
Alberto Diaz.
Yes, Alberto Diaz. Listen, in case of an audit from customs, either U.S. or Mexican, on the certificate of origin or the NAFTA certificate, who is ultimately responsible for that information?
The one that issue the NAFTA certificate. If you as a seller were the one issuing the NAFTA certificate, you are responsible, Alberto. And even you are a producer and you can show that you are the producer in your production lines or procedures, or you have the support from who you purchase the merchandise from, that you can always tell that it's an origin product, but you are the one responsible if you issue the certificate of origin. What is important as well, Alberto, is that if somebody in Mexico, they use your letterhead or your NAFTA certificate or a copy, and they were the ones that did that NAFTA certificate under your name, you just need to prove that happened, because I'm sorry to say that, but those things happen in both countries. It's very common.
Okay, thank you.
Other certificate question. Can I give a NAFTA certificate if the equipment is made in Germany but repaired in the U.S.?
Okay, the origin never changes. If you tell me that you're going to transform a complete transformation of a good, that's different. So we need to go back to the rules of origin. But the origin of the goods never change. And even that's important. If we import, and I have a company that imports little microphones to do these phones, and they import from Japan. And they import from Japan through U.S., and they pay the duties for U.S., and when they come to Mexico, they need to pay again the duty, because the origin is never lost. So what I recommend is bring it inbound in the U.S. and let's import it, so you just pay once for the goods. When you go back, we need to go to the rules of origin to make sure that phone qualifies now as a Mexican product, because the microphone is just a little part. But it is important also that the origin is the correct one.
Okay. Operator? Yes. At this time, there are no further questions.
I have a few more. Rafael, does the seller ship the goods directly to the broker, or why do you say that you receive materials without knowing who the seller is?
The shipper or the seller sends material typically to the broker. When I mean by the broker, it could be a warehouse in any border. Let's talk about your south border, any border. So we receive a lot of material without knowing who the importer is. Sometimes just with a packing slip saying this XYZ company in the U.S. is sending this particular merchandise to my forwarding agency. It arrives to my warehouse, and I don't know even the seller, and I don't know who the buyer is in Mexico.
Or it could be the other side, that you've been contracted by a Mexican company, and the Mexican company asks you, and you don't know where is which is the American seller, or you could know.
Sometimes, Manuel, as long as we know that it's a regular cargo, we accept the goods, and then in a further notice, 2 weeks after, then somebody calls you, oh, by the way, I sent you this merchandise, and I'm going to sell it to this particular company into Mexico. So that particular information can be done again in advance, a pre-alert saying, I'm sending you these goods for this importer in Mexico, attend my shipment, or contact this company in Mexico so you can do all your work. Or that particular company in Mexico, let's say a sales executive from our company, did all the procedures, but he never told me that he was expecting some goods a week after we authorized it in our system. So.
Okay. Another certificate question. Can I create my own NAFTA certificate? And if so, what information should I include?
Okay. Did we include? No, we didn't include the example manual. Can we send?
Yes.
Okay. We will send a NAFTA sample. It's very easy to fill it up, and in case you have questions, please email us. But even we can send it with instructions of how to fill it up. I think it will be better for them to have the format and the instructions how to fill it up.
And also, you can always visit www.export.gov and click on that website for information on tariffs, whether it be classification, etc. And we're also, the Department of Commerce is only a phone call away by calling 1-800-US-TRADE.
And we have the market research We have other resources that is, as a commercial service, we do provide market research with these kind of topics that can help you directly to make the export more successfully.
Another question that we have is, if a shipment is held up at the border by customs and is impounded, what are the options available to help secure the release of the shipment?
Okay, and I think Manuel gets a lot of calls from this matter. If the product gets held at customs, it's because it's already a legal procedure. Depends on what kind of fine, but typically when it's stopped by customs and they hold it, even they're taking an information as the example I made, or they are already making that a legal procedure to keep the goods because that's the fine that they got. Let's talk about when they have over merchandise. If it doesn't exceed a 10% of over merchandise, you pay the fine and you get your goods. If you don't declare it at all and it exceeds, even if it's a complete, totally different product of what you declare, then you get your merchandise fine in 100%. You don't get your goods back. Even you pay the fine, and then those goods they go in to be part of the government, and they do resell it or they do other things with it. But that's why we need to be very careful before entering. It depends on what kind of fine you're being involved in. Right.
Thank you. Operator, can you repeat the procedures for making a phone? For opening the phone?
Once again, if you'd like to ask a question, please press *1. Please unmute your phone and record your name clearly when prompted. Your name is required to introduce your question. To withdraw your request, press *2. One moment, please, for the first question.
Well, I'll keep asking questions. Is my company liable if the Mexican importer alters the value of the merchandise?
As long as you can prove that you were not the one altering that value of the goods, you will always be liable. But that needs to be proven a legal procedure. I need to recommend that it's better not to sell to a company that fixes the value of the goods, because he will always be in some kind of trouble, and by the other hand, it can be as well your trouble, or at least getting audited. You have no need for that. So as long as you're selling to somebody that he fixes his invoices, you're not selling to a liable company. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Operator, any questions?
Our first question comes from Jeanette. Your line is open.
Yes, one more question concerning the NAFTA.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you find out if your product qualifies as a NAFTA?
Okay, Janet, this comes with the NAFTA rules of origin. It's a complete tema,
complete topic.
Separate topic, Janet. Okay. But if you send your request, I can send you what are the rules of origin to make try to 7 minutes. They're long and they're sometimes not very understandable, but it's by value, by where the contents, the hand labor that is done. So there's many ways of classifying as a NAFTA, if it does classify.
And who's certifying you as a NAFTA product?
No, it's not certified. It's just under your responsibility, as long as you can prove you qualify in those NAFTA rules. So there's a specific topic, Laura, Janet, that you need to make sure you qualify for NAFTA. If there's a product in particular you want to send information saying, well, this isn't the content, this is my product, these raw materials are made here, these are made there, my hand labor is this %, we can always as well help you with that.
Okay, thank you.
Our next question comes from Juan Tino. Your line is open.
Hello, this is Tino. Just want to put a couple of scenarios that I have often come up with, which is I am a distributor of equipment, industrial equipment, and most of my customers are in Mexico. And doing so, I have to go out and request quotes from vendors. They could be manufacturers and also distributors for manufacturers. And I always request, you know, a quote and request from them if they can provide a NAFTA certificate of origin or the information to fill out the NAFTA certificate of origin. And they always tell me yes, if they can, or they'll tell me no, we can't. But when the products arrive at the border, they tell me they cannot provide it, contradicting what they said before. And sometimes, not only that, but sometimes the product's made in China instead of the United States. What do you do in situations like that? Or who's, I know I'm the responsible for filling out the certificate of origin, but what do you do in cases like that? Or
you are located in the United States, right?
Yes, I am.
The question here will be that you're reselling the goods?
Yeah, I'm reselling the goods.
You're reselling?
Yeah.
In that particular case, you're a distributor of somebody that will not issue a certificate of origin, then you cannot do a certificate of origin as well.
Yeah, but what do you do when you already bought the goods? They already told you they would provide you a certificate, and suddenly when the product is already here, then they tell you it's not.
That's also very common, you know. But my recommendation is you need, well, I don't know how much you know the companies you distribute for, but I think it's more important for them to sell rather than anything else, you know, because it's a big thing. Yes, you're right. We have many examples that we get merchandise in the border, we cannot cross it, nobody wants to issue a certificate of origin, and then instead of paying 0, it goes to 20 or 25 or 30%.
That's what it ends to, right? Because that's what's been my experience. I get a product, let's say, just to put an example, name of a company X, and they even issue an NAFTA certificate where it's a general NAFTA certificate where they list all their equipment that they sell. So I have to go and pick the one that I bought from them and put it on my NAFTA certificate. But then when the product gets here, it's made in China.
Well, that's a commercial side as well, but I think, well, it can be both. It can be two things. I can rely on not knowing what they're doing, and by the other hand, you just do it on purpose and say, well, I'm going to issue it anyway. And that, believe me, in the border, it happens a lot. We get an NAFTA certificate, we go physically to the goods, and they say China, they serve somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a commercial side between you and who sell it to you, because regarding the border, you cross it, you will have a problem in the border.
Is a commercial what?
It's a commercial issue that
yeah, okay.
That it's a commercial deal. It's not something that legally you can do against them. It's just they're selling you something. They shouldn't be issuing a certificate. The bad thing here is that they don't tell you until they sell it to you.
Okay. No, I know some of the companies that I deal with, they take note and then they correct, but some of them just keep on doing the same thing. So I have to go tell my customer, hey, I'm sorry, it's made in China. You have to pay your duty for it.
Is the same as the delegate that they give you a NAFTA certificate for something that is not from the NAFTA zone? That's not giving it. So giving it is not very well if you go and physically tell that the merchandise is from China, even though they're very good guys with you and they give it to you. Well, it's not correct the same way.
Yeah, and the same situation happens with people that want to export, but they don't know where the product comes from, and they still do an NAFTA certificate, and it's not made in the United States. And but they give it to you, then you give it to your freight forwarder, and then they say, sorry, this came in with something that says here made in Germany. Then you're in trouble.
I'll recommend you something. Get these presentations, and send it to them.
Yeah.
So
I tell them you guys you don't know what you're doing. You're not supposed to issue a NAFTA certificate. This product is not made in the NAFTA region. So, and I get with them. Yesterday I had a big case because I bought a $3,000 furnace, and the guys didn't want to issue a NAFTA certificate, but they said in the quote, we will provide a NAFTA certificate upon purchase. So here I am stuck with the furnace because they don't want to provide it.
How?
And unfortunately, that is not uncommon.
It's not, no.
Well, Rafael, Manuel, thank you so much for a comprehensive and practical presentation. If anyone in the audience still has any questions, feel free to email Manuel, myself, or Rafael.
There's information there.
Everyone in the presentation, in the webinar, will be receiving the recorded presentation as well as the audio in the next several days. Like Karen mentioned, the U.S. Commercial Service, with over 100 offices in the U.S. and 80 throughout U.S. embassies and consulates, can help your company increase sales to new markets. Our dedicated staff will help you get started to increase your sales internationally. We can help you by providing world-class market research, introduce you to qualified buyers and distributors, and counsel you on every step of the export process. If you are new to export company, please take advantage of our 1-800-USA-TRADE phone number, where a dedicated staff can inform you about general exporting counseling, sources of international market research, again, give you insights on tariffs, classifications, and so on. You can also reach one of our 100 export assistance centers near you by visiting www.export.gov. And you can reach us in Mexico by www.buyusa.gov/Mexico. With this, thank you very much for your participation. You'll receive a 2-question survey that I encourage you to respond. This will help us improve our service. The next webinar is scheduled for May 20th.